So we found out last time that people listen. I think we were talking about sex, and then we found out people listen to this, and maybe I don't know,
some correlation.
Started thinking about
what we say.
Yeah, I don't know. But in this episode, so this will come out in January of 25. So leaning into a new year. Do you guys like to have New Year's? Like, how's the New Year land for you? Is like it's just another day, and I just kind of keep doing what I've been doing. Are you guys big into new rhythms, new? Do you feel optimistic going into New Year usually? Or
I feel optimistic. By the way, for those watching, we are still back on the porch.
Yes, porch.
Put another log on the fire to keep us warm as we're out here.
Yes, and if you hear planes going overhead or ambulances or cars, that's all. Yeah,
all the above will likely happen here. So this is actually where a lot of our best conversations have happened. I mean, without any recording equipment, just hanging out here through the summer, through the winter, whatever. So anyway, welcome back to the fire porch. But I'm actually, yes, I am optimistic going into this next year. Obviously, in the last episode, we scrolled through pictures of 2024, and man, I was kind of sobered by some of the hard things that we encountered in 2024, but also some of the pretty momentous things that I hadn't even remembered until I saw those little snapshots here and there and stuff. So that's going to be all part of 2025, right? Some hardships that we never saw coming, but also some incredible highlights that we wouldn't have imagined possible. So
absolutely,
I'm optimistic. Yeah. I'm looking forward to a new year. Yeah.
I feel like it's a built-in change of season, God-given optimism that he built into the calendar.
Do you do resolutions?
I master the restart on Bible reading. So I just restart back in Genesis 1 and whatever.
Are you going to get to see your plan fulfilled this time? Remember how you've got all these plans on your app and you couldn't figure out why the history didn't show them all, but it only records them if you complete them. And Mark was like, "Where's all my plans? All
these Bible reading plans I've done over the years, and I couldn't find them because they weren't finished. It only records your finished Bible plans. No, if I get through a year and I've read the Bible, I'm going to say, like, if I'm batting 70%, I'm feeling great.
Yeah.
So I don't check all the like. There's always going to be days that I miss. I don't try to go back and.
What is that? So in baseball, it's like you hit 300. You're batting pretty good. 3 out of 10 times up. You're saying
700.
I know that.
What's the percentage? You're like, you shouldn't feel good.
I know the average. I know the average that's good, and I'll tell you why. So what's 4 out of 7? 57%. Okay, if you're going 57% of the time you're doing your devotions, that's a success. And I'm going to tell you why. This is like proven scientific fact.
Wow.
I found it on the internet. They did this study where it was like they looked at different markers of like Christian living and sanctification, like how much do you they had these different things, like how much do you share the gospel? How much do you disciple other people? How much do you look at pornography, like sins of omission, commission, different things?
Like, are you progressing in these things?
Yes. Huh? How are you progressing in this thing and trying to connect it to the amount of Bible reading? If someone read their Bible once a day, you don't see much. Twice a day, 3 times, you don't see much change. But day 4, if somebody reads their Bible 4 days out of the week, there's like a spike.
It was a fascinating study.
A drastic spike.
That is amazing.
Like pornography goes down. Like,
what?
You hardly, and it's connect. Why do you think that is?
Just the obviously, habits, I guess it just makes it more habitual if you're at 4.
Yeah, you're over half.
Right, and 1 and 2 times a week it's not really habitual.
Right.
Yeah.
But 4 was that.
That's fascinating.
I remember that.
Isn't that crazy?
It was a great study.
That is.
Yeah.
So let's shoot for that. Well, the title of this whole podcast, right? If we can just hit that, right? Like there's progress. That's beautiful.
You can be average. You just need to be a little above average in Bible reading.
I like that.
And that's the secret sauce of the Christian life right there.
That's
Jake, do you have any new, like going into New Year's, is that doing anything for you?
I agree with you. It's like that God-given gift of a fresh start, wherever the new year is. There's a newness there. I don't know if I like resolutions. I'm a goal-oriented person, so I'll set some goals and try to revisit them. And it feels like I've been a very goal-oriented person most of my life, but in the last several years, it's kind of waned, and I feel like there's a restart in some specific goals I'm trying to reach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Good for you.
Well, we've got we actually have a plan today. We still don't know what's coming. I don't. I asked each of you guys to just bring a topic, something that's been on your mind or something you wanted to process and talk about. And so I don't know what those are, and we don't know what each other was bringing. But Jake, I want you to start. What's your topic? What are we going to talk about today?
I've been thinking about the importance of adventure.
Oh.
Now, help me out. James, what's the if you guys look at, what's the definition of adventure? But
Let's see here.
Why do you
Dictionary says adventure, an unusual and exciting, typically hazardous experience or activity.
I like that. Say it one more time.
An unusual and exciting, typically hazardous experience or activity.
I am going to get that written down because Teresa needs to embrace that hazardous part.
Oh.
She just thinks I'm crazy. Like my adventures often are hazardous, and she thinks that's wrong. But no, that's that's in
Jeff,
the definition.
Let me defend Teresa for a moment because let me just tell you. Okay, so we're in Zambia. We're on the Zambezi River. We're in tents, and I hear it's probably 3 a.m, maybe 3, 4 a.m, and I hear what I think is a bulldozer. It sounds like a literal bulldozer is moving through our camp, and I'm like, what is going on out there? I was scared out of my mind. So I put in my AirPods and watched the first season of Rings of Power.
I'm just going to pretend that's not happening.
As it turns out, that bulldozer was alive.
That bulldozer was a living being, the largest land animal on planet Earth, an elephant.
So Jeff goes out.
So Jeff doesn't put in his AirPods. He goes out.
To find it,
unzips it, goes running after the
while
elephant.
You're in the tent, kind of like no.
I don't want to know.
And so Jeff and Marlon, these 2 partners in crime, go out hunting this elephant. This elephant comes within feet of them and does the whole. It's stomping the dust.
It was hazardous.
Yeah.
No, it was like started to
but it was
charge
an adventure.
It was, dude.
Okay, that's to Teresa's point.
But you don't have a story. You don't have a story. If you don't get a little hazardous, what would have been your story? Had I not been out of that, you wouldn't have that story to tell right now.
Can you imagine?
You wouldn't have even known what it was.
Can you imagine Jeff coming back and just like, see this picture? I was like 10 feet away from an elephant.
Yeah.
Look at this. And Mark's like, no, wait. Do you know what happened in season 2?
Rings of Power.
That actually did happen. He and Jet couldn't wait to see me at breakfast to show me a picture of this small little animal doing something bizarre. Dude, you got to see this. You got to see this. And I'm like, that's amazing.
I was with my middle school son, and we were walking, and there was a monkey sitting on the. It's like, and it was like close, like we're walking just down the sidewalk, and a guy came out. And he's like, "Hey, be careful! There was an elephant in the camp last night." I was like, "Oh, maybe that's what that was," but anyway, we keep walking and we see this monkey on the just on the fence sitting there at eye level, and it kind of freaks you out. Well, I'm with my middle school son, and this monkey is sitting there like masturbating.
Okay, I did know that. I chose not to say what video.
Now this makes more sense of our conversation, our last podcast.
Yeah, this is nature. This is nature being
So
okay. So I have to have a parenting moment. So what do I do?
yeah, as you walk along the way.
So this is Deuteronomy 6 stuff. I pull out my camera and I start filming it, and I come back to Jeff like, dude, I had no idea they did this.
Yeah.
And
he's just marveling. You got to see this.
and so Jeff's like,
We're all
oh,
bleary-eyed because we've been chased by an elephant for half the night. Oh, that's amazing, Mark.
Let me show you what I
Dealing with masturbating monkeys while you're getting chased back. Okay.
all in the Zambezi.
All right. This is
What's
what
your
I've
topic? Get us.
been. Yeah, this is what I've been thinking about. The importance of adventure,
Oh yeah.
which is so formative in shaping who we are. And if in today's situation, if you try to avoid danger, hurt, pain, disappointment, you could inadvertently avoid adventure. And what's the implications of that? Even when it comes to Christianity, it is an adventure. The call to follow Christ is connected with the narrow road. It's connected with take up your cross. It's connected with die to yourself. And the concern is, have we lost? I mean, living in America in a day and age where safety is a high value, protection is high value, how we parent, do we inadvertently just rob ourselves or kids of adventure? And if you take adventure away, does that impact development, shaping of who we are, even within Christianity? So along the importance of adventure, one of the questions I had for you guys was, what are some of your adventures? I mean, you shared the one with, but like when you look back on your life, what would you say these were adventures, and what impact did they have on you?
The first thing I thought of, and I think I'm in line with you on this. What's the correlation between the lack of adventure and the rise of anxiety? That it's counterintuitive that the more, because what you find in an adventure is you take this risk and it develops your like endurance muscles. Like and this was the most amazing thing that I discovered this past year of our Colorado backpacking trip. So you're backcountry, you're hiking, I don't know, 6 days or whatever. You're hungry, you're pushing your body to the limits, but you're simultaneously enjoying the grandeur of God's creation. You're in places, we're in a camp in the mountains, there's no one else. It's just us. And it's terrifying. You like can have a moment of like panic of if somebody breaks a bone or an ankle or something, I don't know how we're getting out of here. We've got a GPS, a satellite phone with one button on it, and it's hazardous. When it was over, it was one of the most satisfying feelings of like we just did that. So I wonder that if there's what the connection is and why adventure develops perseverance, endurance, muscles.
Yeah, I mean, but also just trust. I mean, you're in situations where you're not in control. Something could go bad, and yet you get through it. What does that do to your soul? What does that do to your psyche? How does that shape somebody? And if you never put yourself in those situations, like it seems like we're a society that's both obsessed with adventure and depraved of it. Like because the books we read,
deprived, I think.
Yeah, but that's my infamous saying.
You might be depraved also, but you were deprived.
That is certainly true. We're deprived of it because the books we read, the movies we watch, like we love adventure,
right?
But do we ever have any ourselves? That I think through most of human history, you didn't have a luxury not to have.
That's so true, Jay.
Adventurous types, and now
life was adventurous.
Life was adventurous. Even like I think what started me thinking on this was just interacting with our Zambian friends of like, oh, your walk to work was a bit of an adventure. Right. Like what you came across, the unknown, like we don't know what's going to happen. And and thinking we don't have those experiences here, and we've never really talked about or thought about what are the unintended consequences of that, where you've grown up,
like insulated or protected, yeah.
Reading about adventures, watching adventures, and you've never had one. And an adventure could be you went off to college, you know,
right.
like. So I'm just wondering for you guys, if you look back on your life, are there some adventures that stand out that were formative to you?
Let me just ask a question that came to mind is part of parenting forcing adventure on kids?
I think so.
Like, hey, you need to get out of the house. You need to.
I actually thought of this just across the street is a park. I had James's son, Levin, my grandson, Levin, over here, and he loves to jump. He loves to climb. So he was jumping off these things, and he's just a little squirt. He's only 3. So there was a part of me that just kept reflexively trying to keep him from doing that. Like, I'll catch you, or whatever. And then I thought, back to your point about earlier days, like there would have been an earlier day when that 3-year-old would have been jumping out of trees, jumping out of the hayloft, whatever. You know what I mean? Like just everyday life would have had way more risk than in this controlled setting of the playground. And so I ended up having that whole conversation with myself and being like, back off. He actually knows what hurts at this point. He knows when it's appropriate to be afraid. Mm-hmm. He's not afraid to do that. So let him do that, you know. But I think that parenting thing, back to your point, if we prevent our children from experiencing that exhilarating next step, and maybe they will get hurt. And that will also be formative, like, oh, wait, I do have limits and I got to self-regulate rather than expecting parents to always be those regulators.
Let me make another hot take on this. I think we seek the wrong adventures. Like, I think when we seek adventures, it's like, okay, so I'm going to go have this experience. I'm going to go travel the world. I'm going to go do that kind of adventure. But here's another adventure, like having a kid.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. That's an adventure. And
risky,
that's
and
it's
hazardous.
Risky, it's hazardous. It could, wait, will I be able to provide for this? Will I be able to love this child? What if this?
True.
So
what if there's this? What if this goes wrong?
I get that. But what happens when somebody has a kid and that's the first adventure? They've never had any adventures ahead of that. Like that's their first,
right.
Where
you gotta train for it, right? I mean, that's where,
because I would say that's one of the ultimate adventures,
right,
of raising kids and having a family.
I think that risk taking I mean, the one that immediately came back to my mind. Maybe we talked about this on a previous episode, but when the opportunity came to haul my wife, little boy, pregnant wife, and little boy to Los Angeles to go off to seminary back in the day, the level, I don't know if I can like exaggerate the level of risk that was for this very poor, very young, unprepared family to drive a couple time zones away and move to Los Angeles. Many times thought this is stupid. A lot of people saying, what are you doing? This is crazy. You can't afford it. La, 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 you know. And I just think of the trajectory of my life had I not taken that risk. I'm just grateful that somehow by God's grace, like his calling, the tyranny of his will kind of overpowered the naysaying within me and other voices. And I'm so thankful. You know what I mean?
I was thinking about a question that my sister asked me. This was a long time ago. I don't know, 20 years ago. She said, if you could do one thing in life and someone told you it's not going to fail. Like if you knew it wasn't going to fail, what's something you would do? Like if you knew for a fact the adventure is going to have a good outcome, what would you do? And she still brings it up to me all the time. She said, I remember what you said. You would plant a church. And I look back on my life, and we did end up planting a church, and I can look back on my life and say, next to my family and the adventure of just being married and our marriage and having children, I would say that was an adventure that is so satisfying.
Yeah.
And
I was thinking of that for you because I remember walking with you through those early days, and it just seemed like all risk. The reward seemed obviously there, but overwhelmed by the risk in that risk or reward. You know what I mean?
Well, and so we're living the adventure. I mean, if someone would have said to you, Jeff, 20, however long ago, 20 years ago. Been like, let me just go back to 1997.
Yeah.
You know where you and I were? We were in the old Medina of Morocco, Meknes, Morocco, like looking over this old city, this ancient city. And if someone could have said, hey, just showed a picture of this, of us, the three of us, and just said, where are you?
Yeah.
And what do you think you'll be doing? And they told us, like, you'll be in Iowa City. And we just would have been like, no way. But that's like, we're living the adventure.
And then I would have immediately said, who's that old dude with that gray that's me? Holy cow, back the reel up. I don't want to see that.
It's adventure.
No, it's true.
So I think for people that, here's some advice for people that struggle with maybe fear, anxiety, that thing. If somebody said to you, hey, here's one thing you need to know about your life. It's all going to work out. It's going to be okay. If somebody told you that, would it change your perspective or your feelings of fear? If they just said to you, hey, it's all going to work out. Because here's what I would say to that person is, it's all going to work out. It's all like life. If you're following Christ, if you're living in the strong tower of the Lord, it's all going to work out.
But what's important to clarify that is it'll all work out someday, but the adventure is not absence of pain and hardships and risk and
100%. I agree with you, Jake. This could have not happened. There's a whole lot of people that say yes to the impulse to go plant a church and fail. This side of heaven, I'm saying,
works out.
Right. Don't have this moment to look forward to.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that it didn't work out from God's perspective.
Right. So do you think of any particular adventures that were shaping for you?
Can I go back and ask you a question on that? We'll get to that in a second. I was just thinking of people that might be listening that's like, oh yeah, I did have a kid and it didn't work out.
Right.
What do you say to that?
Or marriage.
Person? Like, marriage. Like, we did those.
Or church
when
planting.
You said church plant and it didn't.
Move to LA and whatever.
What would you say to someone who feels like, oh, I did, there was hazard and it actually ruined my life? Or there's a grief in.
You feel like it at that moment.
There's loss, there's grief, there's.
Yeah, if by it didn't work out, I would say broaden the story here. That's if the adventure is just, a moment in time, then that can be a painful moment. But if you broaden, like it will work out. The adventure is still going, and the target is faithfulness to finish to cross the finish line, faithful to God, not peter out at the first trial or third or fifth or 100th trial. But to also push back against the illusion of control, because it's like, I took an adventure and I got hurt, therefore I'm never doing that again. And you try to isolate or insulate yourself from every form of risk or pain or hurt. And it's like, you can't do that either. That's not reality. It's not any way to live. It's certainly not a way to follow Christ.
Do you think people blame God for failed? Like, God told me to do this. I'm like, well, I don't know if God did tell you to do that.
I think, so this is where it falls on us. There's a responsibility as pastors where if we preach an adventurous Christianity, then we get a people who, at the first signs of discomfort or pain or hurt, they're mad at God.
Yeah.
And they're mad at God. And they're like, how could you let this happen? Don't you care about me? But nowhere do you get that idea in the Bible of this painless, carefree, easy road of following Christ. So if we don't portray an adventureful Christianity, we're doing our people a disservice.
Well, think of even the phrase you just used, following Christ. Well, think about that in real time, following Christ. If you had just stayed on his heels, following Christ,
you're going to have an adventure.
It would have been a very hazardous adventure and not turned out the way that your hopes and dreams would have imagined this story ending, right? But eventually, better than. You know what I mean? The greatest story ever told would eventually come out. But in those moments, you'd be thinking, wait, I left my career, I left my family, I left whatever it is to follow Christ, and things are going terrible.
I think of when Jesus calms the storm, the disciples are in the boat with Christ, and they're facing a storm that's tearing their boat apart. They're a real danger of sinking, and they're in the boat on the sea because they're following Jesus. Like that brought them into that situation. It's real fear. It's real danger. And then yet Christ wakes up from his nap, calms the storm, and they experience a real miracle. And it's like, would you rather just have smooth sailing? Or would you have rather get enlightened to who, because they say, who is this? That even the wind and the sea obey him. Like, wasn't that worth it? And it's like, I feel like we've presented, or there's a Christianity, it's like, just put me in a boat where there's no waves and take me to the other side. And the other side is heaven, eternal. Like, just get me smooth sailing. It's like, but that's not what the boat Christ is in.
Totally.
I just spilled all over.
Jake, you were having this incredible moment, and out of my peripheral, I'm watching Mark literally dump water.
We need to get him a bib.
I missed. I need a bib.
The water does not obey you.
I was trying to stay locked in as I'm in the peripheral watch.
You just see water pouring down. Hey, Jeff, one thing I don't hate about myself.
I spill.
I'm a hot mess. You've seen lots of, there's crumbs and spills. I had this morning, you want to know how my day started? I'm like, making some bacon, and I plop the egg on the bacon grease, because that's the best kind of egg.
That's the best way to cook it.
And boom, just the bacon grease just splashed all over my, does that ever happen to you? I need to wear an apron. Yeah. So anyway.
Well, I want to know. Okay, go ahead.
I was just going to read Hebrews 11 where he says, just talks about the life of faith. And he says, women received their dead, raised to life again. Other people were tortured, not accepting release so that they might gain a better resurrection. Others experienced mockings and scourgings as well as bonds and imprisonment. They were stoned, they were sawed in two, they died by the sword, they wandered about in sheepskins and goatskins, destitute, afflicted, and mistreated. The world was not worthy of them. They wandered in deserts and on mountains, hiding in caves and holes in the ground. All these were approved through their faith, but they did not receive what was promised, since God had provided something better for us, so that they would not be made perfect without us. Therefore, since we also have such a large cloud of witnesses surrounding us, let us lay aside every hindrance and the sin that so easily ensnares us. Let us run with endurance the race that lies before us, keeping our eyes on Jesus, the source and perfecter of our faith. For the joy that lay before him, he endured the cross, despising the shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. That's adventure.
That's adventure.
That's when you said, if we give people an adventureless Christianity, whatever, then you said after that. I think the adventureless Christianity that a pastor could give is a prosperity.
Yeah.
It's going to be.
So it's the mindset in 1 Corinthians 15 where Paul's like, if I fought wild beast in Ephesus, what good was that if there's no resurrection? If there's no resurrection, then what he says, eat, drink, be merry, for tomorrow we die. Well, what if that's YOLO, right? You only live once type of mentality. But Paul's saying, no, you don't only live once. There's a resurrection. And his belief in the resurrection has led him to embrace a life that involves fighting wild beasts and all the suffering he went through. But what happens within the church when YOLO is an embraced lifestyle? It's like, hey, I have to have as much fun now. I have to have as much enjoyment now. I have to have as much comfort now. And I'm going to tag Jesus onto it. So how do we champion the adventure of Christianity?
Well, I mean, one, read passages like that to our people. You know what I mean? Because the incredible combination in Hebrews 11 of unrealized expectations, unrealized even good aspirations. And yet that very thing is the beckoning call. Therefore, since those are the kind of people who have gone before us, run your race. That's what we need to do, is preach the reality of the Bible. It's when we try to offer people the candy sticks, when we offer people this softened, pleasant gospel, that's on us, right? That's, if they're surprised by suffering, it's maybe because we haven't done a very good job teaching and preparing them from the scriptures, that's the call of Christ.
Yeah. I even wonder, like, and this kind of crosses over to parenting, is there training wheels of like taking your kids on a backpacking trip? Okay, we did hard things. We faced some danger. We experienced God's faithfulness. We came out on the other side. Wasn't that awesome? Doing that, and then it's like, okay, I have to bring up Christ to my friends in the cafeteria who are having a conversation. I've done a hard thing. I've seen God's faithfulness. I know what's on the other side of this. Does that help? Does adventure translate? Like, okay, these kind of adventures worked a muscle or an experience that has implications.
One of the training wheels is put down your phone. I mean, you can't have an adventure on your phone. So, like, because it is like gaming. The whole gaming culture is you get all the, like, you're jumping out of a plane onto this island and you're fighting to the last man, and you're in Fortnite and you're doing this whole thing, and it's taking hours and you're up till 2 a.m. doing it, and then but there's zero hazard, there's zero risk, you get all the thrill of picking up a gun and shooting it without any of the actual real life hazard of jumping out of a plane.
It reminds me of the scene in The Hobbit where Gandalf tells Bilbo, like, your adventures aren't in your books. It's out there, right? Because it's like you can just have these artificial adventures. But there's a reason why we love it. We love those stories. But if you only stay in your phone or your video game or in your books, where it's like,
or read the books about. I went through a phase in my early 30s, I'll say late 20s, maybe early 30s, of the first book that I read. It opened a whole portal into a world of adventure that I just loved, and I want to rekindle that. Is the first book was called In Harm's Way, and it tells the story of the sinking of the USS Indianapolis, and it's the one that carried one of the atomic bombs, and on its way back, it was torpedoed, and the Navy lost it for 6 days. Yeah. They didn't even know, they forgot about it. And it was kind of a huge mystery on how that happened. But these guys, there's like 1,000 sailors in the ocean survive. And the whole book is about their survival and their, treading water, holding on to things for 6 days. And guys are getting pulled in by sharks, and other guys are, having delusions and like trying to drink the water to quench their thirst, and they die. But it's a survival, and that led into, then I read Endurance, the story of Shackleton, and on it went into Citizen Soldier and D-Day, like more historical Stephen Ambrose books. That I love that, and that, even that though, is better than like just a social media or video game thing, because I do think those real life adventures can kind of spark a hunger to go do something.
It pushes the boundaries or the limits of what you thought any human could endure. You know what I mean? Like it shows you, oh no, this isn't fanciful. This isn't a made up game. These are real lives, and they're still around to tell the story, and it gives you courage. You're like, dude, I'm made of the same stuff that they are,
Yeah. Is there anything uniquely that we should be doing in our churches to, I know it's like preach the Bible, tell these stories, read these amazing passages, but anything beyond that you think helps reinforce the adventure of Christianity, or to kind of disrupt comfortable?
I think practically it's this: make the ask. I think, and here's the ask. I think that so much of this is basic pastoral ministry 101, but just not just pastoral, but just Christian, is make the ask. The ask being, what is the step of faith that you would invite someone into? Like, hey, what would you think of jumping into a group with me and inviting a friend and let's read the Bible together? Yeah. Or, hey, what would you think of leading a group? Or, hey, what would you think of jumping on this medical mission trip to Zambia? Just making the ask of, or what's that little step? Hey, what would you think of reading the Bible? Something simple.
I love that. Yeah. Because it's like back to kind of the Hobbit of like, I don't know the quote of, it's a dangerous business going out your door. You never know where, like his adventure begins with just this easy step of going outside. Yeah. Like just asking a friend, hey, you want to read the Bible together for, let's take 6 weeks. Like, that could be the beginning of adventure. It's you want to go on this missions trip. It's the beginning of like how many opportunities or first steps to adventures do we present?
The only reason I took the Colorado adventure, I mean, Dave Hicks, our boys were talking about going on this, and Dave kind of led us, but you need a kind of a guide into adventure. You see yourself as a pastor as like a guide to, no, I'm telling you, God is faithful. This is going to be okay. We're in the middle of an adventure right now, our building campaign, and I'm like, I see it as an adventure, as of where we're recording. We're not quite there. And I feel like this is the exciting time.
And kind of hazardous in the sense that we don't know how this is going to actually turn out.
I love this. I love this moment because this is the ascent of this is the last push up the mountain. This is where those of us who know the Lord are like, get on my back. I'll carry you. Like, we are going to get there.
But the language matters because if we only present hard things of like, well, this is going to be tough, this is going to be challenging, and not language of adventure. Because adventure, in my mind, well, to the definition, hazard will be involved, danger, risk will be involved, but there's something
like compelling
to it, not just...
Dude, you're going to love the view. I feel the call to come to Iowa City was an invitation into adventure. I can so vividly remember, and if anyone's heard me tell the story, you know what's coming out of my mouth. But it was, after you and Troy asked me, what would you think of going to Iowa City? Just being in this empty auditorium in Ames and feeling the Lord saying, hey, what would you think of going on this adventure? An invitation into a journey. And I think that's what we do, and that's what the Lord, they're like, and I felt like the Lord was saying, you're going to love the view. That's the part of it, that you're going to love.
When you invited me to come up here, that was a adventure where I'm leaving, a ministry Candyland with my friends and a good large church where there was a lot of provision. And I remember early on in those Sundays of the DoubleTree smaller room, thinking, what did I do? Like what?
Well, you said no to the adventure first. Remember that?
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
And then, Eric doubled that, asked you again, and you sure.
Yeah, and here, last Sunday we did 40-some baptisms, and
no way!
I love the view.
Wow.
Yeah,
but Jake, it's never. We can't be a follower of Christ and not take risks,
right?
Not embrace adventure.
Yeah.
What's an adventure you're proud of? I mean, obviously that would be one coming up here.
Yeah, I think there's several adventures in my life. I can lean into that, like going to college and being the only kid from the Midwest. That was an adventure. Am I going to follow Christ? Starting a Bible study with my roommates. I was like, how's this going to go? Dropping out of college and then transferring to Moody, like adventure. Every move we've made has been a bit of an adventure, and it just reinforces
moving to small town Iowa.
It's like, it's a risk. How's this going to go? And that was a church that it's like, are we going to shut our doors or take a risk with this young pastor? So that was a risk. Leaving that was such a sweet place. We loved it there. So leaving to go to Arizona. So every kind of step of obedience is an adventure, and God's faithful. Whether it worked out the way it did or differently, God's faithful. And
if you're going to talk to the person that's listening right now,
the one person.
Let's just assume for a moment there is someone listening.
We know they're listening.
We know you're there.
You guys are our listening count was just shooting up like a skyrocket. Because last time when James was telling us how many listeners, like 3 new people.
Yeah, well, it's around how often you talk about sex. So.
Yeah.
We're up to 2 new listeners since
Wow.
starting
Okay,
recording.
2 new
So.
listeners.
Holy cow. Just speak to those 2, Jake.
Yeah, that's
Those
who it is.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Those two. James. Well, we're just down to 1.
Yeah.
Oh, we lost him.
We lost him.
Hurry quick. Say it before they tune out.
Jay, give your word to someone who's listening that, okay, I'm just going to say this person maybe struggles with fear, struggles with taking that step, uncomfortable step. Give me your best pastoral invitation into the adventure.
Towards somebody that's struggles with fear. I mean, I think my mind initially goes to Jesus' words challenging somebody with anxiety or worry. Like, what good is it going to do for you to worry? Like, it doesn't change anything. And goes on to say, seek first the kingdom of God. That's an adventure. So I'm going to say, you can try to protect yourself from all the dangers of this world, and you can't. You can make every measure that you can, and cancer can get you tomorrow. You can be in a car wreck going, like, it is a lie to think you can insulate yourself from the dangers. The best thing you can do is seek first the kingdom of God. Take that adventure. Be willing to lose your life for his sake, and you'll find it. Like, that's a promise. So
I think too that, I mean, the 3 of us are pastors, so a lot of our illustrations and all that are along that vocation, that calling. But I was thinking of a young family at Veritas who have one of their children that has a lot of unknown, some disabilities because of even just what happened through birth, chromosomal. Anyway, and now strongly thinking about, man, I feel like, am I verging on not asking permission to tell us, having yet another child, having now seen what the burden of parenting can be when you've got a child with higher needs. And yet I love the fact that that's not keeping them from adoring and loving that child, realizing that it's a package deal. The joy that they get far exceeds the work or the pain and the suffering of having that child. And now wanting to add yet another child, knowing that what are the risks? Could this happen again? Could this next child bring the same level of burden and carrying the pain as this one? So I'm just saying, like, these acts of faith go far more than just callings into ministry, like we're sharing here. Other big life adventures that are very high reward, but very serious risk. And are you going to seek the Lord? Are you going to pray to the living God and say, God, would you have me add that all up? And even if the risk seems outrageously high, I think you're calling me to do that. Yeah. And I'm going to say yes.
And not only if the risk seems like Christ was very upfront with like the broad road, narrow road thing of saying it's hard, few find it, and it leads to life.
Yes.
The broad one, a lot of people do that, and
totally.
It's easy.
It's easy.
And it leads to destruction. So it's like, which one do you want the easy road?
Right.
Or do you want the hard road? Well, if that was the only thing offered, I think, give me the easy road.
Right.
But it's like, okay, now let's factor in the destination. Now which one do you want? So I think to continue to keep the destination in front of us.
Wow. Jake, this sounds like a chapter of a book that you're going to write. What have you done any writing on this topic?
No.
Adventure? Okay, I'm putting that on your
next
fire porch when we get together and do our readings. I want to read this chapter. An invitation
talk about it some
to
more?
adventure. It's a great topic. Jeff.
Yeah.
It's your turn.
Yeah, so mine, we just got done at Veritas, Iowa City, covering 1 Timothy. It's got me reflecting now on the other side of that. So Timothy is a pastor in Ephesus, so we know more about that church in Ephesus than probably any other church, including the church in Jerusalem. We've got a lot more Bible on it because you got in Acts 19, they are founded and they love Jesus so much they're willing to pull all their witchcraft books and everything and burn it all. You know, millions of dollars of artifacts burned because they love Jesus more than those things. And then, the book of Ephesians, and he's calling them to the love. You got to understand the love of Christ, the depth, the height. 1 Timothy, all the way, though, until you get to those haunting words in Revelation. Like, it seems like the reason we know so much about the church in Ephesus is because of what an incredible church it is and what incredible leadership it has and how much they're willing to sacrifice for Christ, and on every way hitting every high mark. And then however many years go by, not probably as many as we would like to think, it doesn't take long, and the letter that they get from Jesus in Revelation 2 says, "But I have this against you. You have abandoned the love you had at first. Remember then how far you have fallen. Repent and do the works you did at first." So that's got me thinking, if love for Jesus, love for each other, love for the gospel was the thing that Ephesus was known for, but had now fallen from that, what would you guys say are some cool aspects of Veritas Cedar Rapids and Veritas Iowa City that really marked the church? Like, you would say but what do we need to do to make sure we don't someday get a letter to be like, oh, that used to be, hold on to that. Like, in fact, what he says, go back and do the things you did at first. Like, are there things that you would say, these are some characteristics of this church that I love so much? And even if you don't see them as like teetering or in danger right now, you would say, oh man, I want to work hard to preserve those and not take for granted that all the press clippings can be great for, you know what I'm saying? Like, what are those things you really love about your church? And you want whatever else comes to preserve that and even restoke those fires.
One of the things I don't, it's hard because I think in the early days of Veritas, I was more aggressive in calling people to a life of faith and sacrifice. And I don't know how much of that is the immaturity of youth or how much of it is the passion of faith.
Wow.
In a young man. I sat down with a guy, they wanted to jump into Veritas, and I never forget, I was at Poncheros, and this guy worked at the university. He sat down, and I basically said, if you want to be a part of Veritas, I'm going to ask you to give more than you've ever given in your entire life, financially. And I don't know if that was super great pastoral moment. Maybe it was. Maybe it was. I still, because I think about those early days and it's like, hey, just give a bunch of money away. Like we're just a church of college students. And if you're like one of the few people with an income, and unashamedly, I'm going to say, give beyond anything you've done before. This isn't the place to come and be comfortable. I worry a little bit that it's like, have I lost that edge a little bit? Yeah. And some of it is wise about how you don't ever want to see someone through the lens of a dollar figure.
Right.
And what they can give. So in the early days,
so whether that exact moment was wise or not, at least that impulse to call people to the adventure, kind of what we're just doing.
Yes, because you can get.
Have we blunted that a little bit over there?
Yeah, and I think it doesn't get easier to give when you get older because now you're kind of thinking about your retirement a little more. Do you feel that? I mean, well, you're a little closer than I am. So, but you can think like, dude, you got a big old nest egg there. Like, crack into that and just give. Don't just build up bigger storehouse. So I think that I don't want to lose that faith. That just let's get after it. Let's seek first the kingdom and. I don't know. Have I gotten soft? I don't know. But I want to keep that walking by faith and not by comfort.
Because that marked Veritas, Iowa City, you would say.
Yes. Oh, totally. We were small, but we were mighty.
So you could almost say, go back and do the things you did at first in that sense. Yeah.
Call people to that, I think maybe.
Mm-hmm. Jake, what about you?
I think one thing that marks us that we never want to lose is boldly teaching all the Bible. I think we've gotten feedback of, oh, you guys just said it, or you guys, pointed it out in Scripture. So, I mean, hopefully we never abandon the Bible.
Yeah.
But not just abandon the Bible, but never abandon preaching the Bible faithfully.
Like the hard truths.
Yeah, and just standing by even the hard truths as they're actually good news. They may be hard for our culture, but they're good news. So that's one aspect that I would hope we'd never lose. Just a faithfulness to the text.
How is that different from in Ephesus? He says, I think there's two ways you can go cold. It's like you lose doctrine or there's some kind of moral compromise. But it's like, so they held on to.
Yeah, it's interesting. He says, I know your works, your labor, your endurance. They had all that going for them. And then you cannot tolerate evil people. You've tested those who call themselves apostles and are not. You found them to be liars.
They hate the Nicolaitans.
So there was a sense that they were still orthodox.
Yeah.
But they, you know what I mean?
That's what I'm asking you. I'm going to kind of say, how do you, because it's like, oh yeah, we preach hard against the Nicolaitans. We've held the line on preaching the word, but when it connects to, you do that, but you lost your love. Like, how do you see that in your, how do you?
I don't want us to be. When I say that we preach the Bible faithfully, it's probably wrapped up in how I see preaching. So preaching isn't just a doctrinal communication that's stale of emotion, but there's a fervor, a zeal for the truth, and not just the truth, but the Lord. There's a deep love for His Word and our Savior. So I think that we would never lose. I mean, it's the heartbeat of the book. Like, God's the prize.
Yeah,
we're passionate about God. That shows itself in everything that He's said. We're passionate about.
So the difference between preaching the word and in a way that could be Ephesus saying, well, we still preach the word, and a preach the word, it's like preaching God the prize.
Yeah, I mean, it's you can be very doctrinally, accurate,
right,
and dead,
right.
But if you're going to preach it, there's a proclamation, there's a heralding of it. Like, you're excited about it. I always want us to be excited about.
One of my perceptions is that churches like preach the word churches that are really actually maybe have lost some of their first love. This might be on the border you can tell me if this is just arrogance or just a misperception. But my thought is the churches are like, we're holding the line on the word, we're preaching the word, we're preaching the word. They got into some of the the error that they have fallen into is some of the political fervor of, in the name of preaching the word, we're like not afraid to say this and insert something that's how would you feel?
Yeah, because I remember, I think we might have even mentioned before, but one of the podcasts I heard at one point, and it was a guy saying, I'm going to say the stuff that your preacher is too afraid to say or whatever. There are churches and just people out there that they feel like strength, courage, even maybe orthodoxy or whatever, holding fast to the word means being strong and maybe even abrasive. And so that spilled over quickly even into political things like, I'm going to say the hardest thing because that's what we need to hear, you lame, weak, those people.
I think in defense, those things being listed to Ephesus, he's like, I like that.
Yeah.
That's not a bad thing. I like that you hate the Nicolaitans.
Right. That's good.
You hate
He's
the same
commending
people
them.
I hate. Right? It's like,
Good call.
so it's like,
Good call,
that's
Jake.
not a bad thing. It's a bad thing to have that without love.
Right. You're not trying to win the Nicolaitans to Christ.
Yeah.
You just hate them.
Yeah. Hate the right people. And love the truth.
And maybe lack of love for each other. You know what I mean? That was the thing that marked the early church, right? Is that they were so willing to be sacrificial for each other. The love of the church was white hot for one another as this family.
Yeah.
And can you all be militant about those people out there, but not truly love each other and take care of each other and meet one another's needs and have that overflow? Yeah. Yeah. That's good.
What do you think? Or
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, here's the thing. I obviously, having framed the question, I've thought about it. I haven't really landed the plane. That's why I was curious to hear from you guys. But there is that sense that we're not always to stay either adolescent or juvenile or whatever. Like there are those growing pains we are supposed to grow through. You know, even like you're talking about those early days when you had that hard conversation over breakfast or whatever. So you don't want to just expect those early days to be rekindled all the time. But there are some things about early works. I do think levels of sacrifice that all of us have been through, because if we don't do it, it's not going to happen, you know, and maybe even passion for the gospel, because a lot of the people that are part of that church have come to Christ in that church. And so there's this just, your friends are coming to Christ, your family members are coming to Christ, that just white hot evangelism is going on. So I do think, whatever happens down the road, no matter how mature or how many years we've got on the odometer, that, man, those things are still true. Love for the lost, love for each other. You know what I mean? That, man, that stuff should not ever grow cold, or we just get really good at doing church.
What would you think when he says you've lost your first love? Mm-hmm. What do you think that is referring to?
Well, I wonder, the thing that comes to mind is just Acts 19. I mean, their love for Christ was so pronounced that when they realized, all these things I've invested my money in are actually anti-Christ. You know, they are anti-God. I'm not going to sell them on eBay. I'm going to burn them to show I don't want anybody else to have these things either. You know, so that level of just surrender to Christ, that everything I have is yours and everything. So I wonder if that love vertically was, it's got to be part of it, right? Because that was such a high mark of the Ephesian church.
is it they took repentance seriously?
Yeah, there you go. That's a good way.
They were radical in dealing with sin.
Yeah, it was visual. Like it was visible. You could
Personal
see it.
holiness.
Maybe you got some of those scrolls back, and you know, and you've accepted some of the culture.
Yeah, there you go.
There is an unfortunate dichotomy that gets made to that letter to Ephesus of like, I don't want to be this stuffy truth church. I just want to be a loving church.
Right.
And it's like,
Right.
Yeah.
So that the application is like, who cares about truth? Let's just love each other.
Right. And that would certainly not receive a commendation by Jesus, right?
Yeah.
You know?
But to be both truth and love, and a love for the truth and a love for living out the truth.
Yeah.
Could one of that in the dichotomy be you have like Bible teaching churches and then you have spirit filled churches?
Right.
Like
as if there's a dichotomy, right?
Yeah, we emphasize worship, prayer, the Holy Spirit, and these churches over here are just Father, Son, Holy Bible churches. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, man, I'd rather not have to choose.
Right.
I don't know. That's a choice you have to make. But
it's like, well, if I have to fall in a ditch, it's like, well, you don't.
You don't actually. You can stay on the narrow path, as it turns out.
None of us have it perfect, you know.
No.
But there is that's a good question. That's especially timely with New Year's.
Yeah.
Is thinking of what are some ways that I've allowed sin to creep in, and
because how often does God say, go back and do the stuff you did at first?
Yeah.
More often than not, it's quit doing those childish things and move on. That's the analogy God usually uses in the word, and rightly so. But this is an interesting thing. What are those things we did at first? Again, like the Ephesians burning books, that God was actually like, oh man, that showed a white hot love for me, a white hot love for repentance. Go back and do that stuff again, you know?
I mean, no, in our kind of fundamentalist background, where it's like when you hear burning books or burning, we'd like, oh, well, we're so past that. Like, do you think there's a spirit in Ephesus of like, oh, well, we've moved on?
We used to go
Like, there's a
smash
passion.
our Def Leppard records and, you know.
Or
Queen.
Teresa burned mine.
Teresa burned your records?
Oh, I had the biggest
Those would be
album
worth
collection.
so
much money. Yeah, she was an Ephesian, man. She calls me, hey, by the way, I burned all your albums.
What album do you most wish you could have back?
Honestly, they were all classic rock because at that point they weren't classic yet. They were just rock and roll. I had a huge array of classic rock, that went up in smoke. But I think she was waiting to hear demons scream.
And outside of like diving into that issue, is there a complacency of holiness that we've just kind
there
of
you go.
Yeah.
Or so this is Ephesus later on. It's not those early days of, I mean, Paul talks about the work in all of Asia that's just going out to everywhere. And people, like their gospel witness impacted that local economy.
Yeah.
Like it was a tremendous work. Now you're established. So go back to even talking about adventure. Like what's true of both of our churches in the early days is we took risk.
Right.
Like we stepped out. And then now you have a budget and you have employees and it's bigger. You could fall into like, how do we just protect?
We just had this conversation with a staff guy where he's like, the reason I was so pumped, he goes, I remember coming to Veritas and one of the first things is like, we didn't have a building or whatever. And we're like, hey, we're planting a church. We're going up to Cedar Rapids. And it was like, what? Now this is the most counterintuitive thing you would do. Is like, and I still remember that elder retreat. We're up there fasting and praying and looking at next year's budget. And we're going to go from $545,000 and raise the budget to $700,000. And $100,000 of it we were going to put in towards Cedar Rapids. And I remember we were talking about California and, well, how will the building impact California? Will we, if it's like things are tight on the building, will we still plant, in California? And the conversation went toward like, well, we already did that. I mean, it was way more risky back then to do that than this. And so I think
a great example. Yeah, go back to that early faith.
Back. Come on, let's
We've
go.
done this.
Yeah. What
the
if
sin of comfort or protection?
Yeah. When have we made, fortify the
safe decisions? Yeah.
Yeah. Safety. I like there's a connection between the adventure topic and the.
I went back and started rereading the first Christian book that I ever read was The Pursuit of Holiness. And I read a portion of it to Veritas Iowa City this last week because I'm looking at my underlines. I must have used a ruler because they're perfect underlines. This was like this sacred. I'd never had a Christian book before. But he talks a lot about we've got to stop using terms like victory and defeat and go back to Bible terms like obedience and disobedience. Like to your point of calling people to holiness, calling people to repent, like, take responsibility for your holiness. Stop talking about, because when you start using words like defeat, it's some outside force that's coming in, as opposed to disobedience, that like squarely on my own volition, my own will, you know what I mean? And so calling people to that, when are we, softening people by not calling them to a
guys
level of holiness?
I don't know how much we care about this, but I think we're over an hour. And I mean, do we care if people are still listening or not? I don't know.
Well, here's what I was going to say on that, though, real quick. Sorry.
Yeah, no. Just we're landing.
We're going to land the plane. Here's what I love. Last episode, there was way more just laughs and memory lane and pictures, and because that's part of Friends and that's part of conversations. And then this part has been, I think, more heavier, more sober. But you almost want to say to the listener out there, hey, keep listening because that's what Friends do. Sometimes it's aspirational and fun and lots of laughter. And then sometimes it's like, man, looking in each other's eyes and having hard conversations and reflection. And I kind of love that we're not trying to keep it, I don't know, but on some recognizable algorithm. Like we're like, no, this is actually the way friends talk,
The gold standard is yet to be determined on what this podcast is and what we're shooting for. But somehow we hit it every time. I don't know. If
At least in our minds.
if we enjoyed the conversation, it was worth it. All right. So as we close, we're gonna next time we hang out, we need to do another reading. And I need accountability on that. I'm working on the Average Dad book. You had that book on elder leadership.
Yeah, I finished.
You finished.
Rough. I think I'm just setting it to the
Next
side.
time, if we remember, could we get maybe an excerpt
on the podcast?
Yeah, read a little bit.
I don't know about that.
Okay, well, we'll see. But I'm anxious to hear that. We'll do a reading next time, and I'll be working. You got any projects you're working on?
Well, I sent in Gospel 201, so that feels great. I do have some now additions because I had some faithful friends read through it and offer me some help. So I'm going to send those in too.
Cool.
But yeah,
it's great.
I'm excited about it.
I'm excited to see that come out. All right, Jake, you want to do our sign off this time and say goodbye?
Yeah. Enjoy the adventure. Following Christ, take some risks, see his faithfulness, and we'll talk next time.
All right. See you next time.